Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast. I'm your host, Steve Creasy, and joining me today is the owner of PackYourPixieDust.com Travel. How are you doing today, Christy?
I'm good. How are you, Steve?
Not too bad. And we just had Halloween. How was Halloween with you?
Halloween was excellent. I had a little gecko from PJ Masks.
That's what Blake dressed up as, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's kind of cool because we are actually going to talk today with Joe from As the Joe Flies and from MilesToTheMagic.com and DisneyDecipher.com. Welcome to the show, Joe. Or welcome back to the show, I should say.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Okay. And if you wonder what we're talking about here, go back to episode 62 when we talked to Joe about his other show and website, Miles to the Magic, and talking about points. But today we are going to do a little DCL 101. We're going to talk about traveling with babies and toddlers, and we brought Joe back to talk about his trip. And you're going to have to remind me when it was here in just a second. But we're going to use your trip kind of as a framework to talk about cruising with basically babies and toddlers. And Christy, you did that with Blake quite a few times. Matter of fact, I think Blake had been on more cruises by the time he was one than I think I have totally.
No, I mean, I think you are even with him by the time he was one.
I know he's been cruising for quite a while, but I think this will be a good topic to tease Joe and his family with, and then also with your experience as well. The first time we cruised, our youngest was 5, so I'm definitely not an expert in the baby category. But as we jump into it, Joe, why don't you remind us when you guys traveled and what ship you sailed on and why you guys chose that cruise?
Yeah, so we traveled out of Port Canaveral in mid-August on one of those midweek 4-night Bahamian Disney Dream cruises. In terms of, why we chose that cruise, so we traveled with 2 other families. We have the youngest kids out of the 3 families, although most of the kids are, it's a spread from 9 months to 8 years old is the oldest kid that we went with. But anyway, that was the week that worked best for all 3 families, so that's how we ended up on that cruise. We didn't want to do, it was my wife's first time on Disney Cruise Line, and also one of the other families, their entire family's first time on Disney Cruise Line. So we didn't want to do anything more than 4 nights just in case, you never know how people respond to their first.
So Joe, you live up in Boston and you guys fly down to the Orlando area. How was that? Or do you have any tips or tricks, I guess, now that you've traveled with 3 kids? I know you guys have done other travels as well besides down to the Orlando area. Traveling with a 1-year-old at the time, do you have any tips or tricks as far as getting down to Orlando via airplane?
Yeah, so, my general advice for families that are thinking about traveling with really young kids, basically toddlers under 2, I guess I have a couple pieces of advice. The first thing I would say is just do it. Our oldest daughter went to Italy when she was 6 months. We've all been to Asia together. We as a family agreed, I guess it was just my wife and myself at the time, but we agreed that we weren't going to let having kids stop us from traveling. And in fact, we feel like traveling is a valuable experience for our kids. So, the first thing I would say is if you're thinking about traveling with a baby, to just do it. I would say, though, that personally, I feel like an 18-month-old is the most difficult age of child to deal with. That has been true for our first 2 kids, and I'm waiting for that to be true for our 3rd one. In terms of, practical tips and tricks, I always suggest, if you can, to pay extra to fly a direct flight. Like, I think, your experience on the plane, it has a lot to do with just kind of how much energy you have, how comfortable you are, and things like that. So, I know the cheapest flights, they always leave at like 6 a.m. or 10 p.m. If you have maybe one baby, you can get away with that. But once you're dealing with multiple kids, you really want to kind of shoot for those 9, 10 a.m. flights and take those direct flights as well. Because, yeah, you might save like $50. And, it's not insignificant, right? If it's 50 times 4 or 5, that's a couple $100 by taking a flight with a connection. However, what happens is if you get delayed, is the extra stress you're going to have with, the extra diapers you need to bring and extra formula or milk, et cetera, is that going to be worth $250 to you? Like, these are the kinds of questions to ask yourself. And I've always answered that as, I'm going to fly direct when I can. When my wife and I, when it was just us, we would take crazy routings. We would do 3 connections and book mistake fares and things like that to get to where we want to go. Because, when it's just 2 adults, delays are frustrating, but they're not like trip killing. But I think with kids, direct is the way to go, in my opinion.
I agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that year and a half, that is the toughest. My parents live over in Hawaii. We did Hawaii quite a few times with both our kids at that age. And yeah, they're just mobile. They don't want to sit in their seat. And if you do get them in their seat, they're kicking the seat in front of them. It's a tough age. Once they get past about 2, and I know that people have some different opinions on this, but they can focus on an iPad or something like that. It makes it a lot easier to give them things to do on board the planes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have to succumb to giving your child just endless amounts of food. We did cereal and things like that with Blake. He took a lot of trips before he was 2 years old, just a ridiculous amount. Not as exciting as Joe's family's trips, but we went to Florida a lot. So a lot of cereal or puffs if they're not big enough to eat cereal. I mean, we were just like, go to town, eat as much as you want so that his ears don't have as much pain. And then a lot of iPad watching. So that's one reason to make sure. People say, like, you have to watch the screen time. And I say, I agree with that when they're little, unless you're going to travel with them, because you have to teach them how to watch TV so that when you're traveling, they know how to watch TV.
Yeah, that's funny. We generally reserve our screen time for when we're traveling, like either on long road trips or when we're flying. But the funny thing is, obviously with our oldest, we were the most vigilant about not giving her a lot of screen time. And we found that, like, she just doesn't have the stamina. Like,
well, right, this is what I'm saying. You have to
she
teach
can't
them.
She can't watch for like more than an hour. Luckily, she is pretty great, and she is good at like finding other ways to entertain ourselves. Like if that was our son and he only had an hour of stamina for screen time, we'd be pretty up the creek on flights. But it works well. I will say one thing about the food thing. One trick that we like to do, especially up until it works until they're like 2 or 3, is you buy one of those pill boxes for like old people, Monday through Sunday.
Yes, and you
pill
put
boxes.
them in each one, right?
Yeah, and you put the snacks in, so it's like it's a toy. It's basically like giving a dog a toy to get their treats. It's pretty excellent. I have a dog. I have kids, so I can compare my kids to my dog, no problem. The other thing I will say in terms of building stamina, you do also want to make sure that your kids can handle that much food without throwing up, because you don't want it to backfire. And you feed your kids so much to keep them placated on the plane that just as you're landing, they Ralph it all up. So I feel like every time I'm on the podcast, we just lose hundreds and hundreds of your listeners because we talk about such random things like vomit on planes.
I think when you're traveling with a kid, that's normal.
Definitely.
During one of my flights to Florida, I did get into a fight with TSA about the amount of water I had for my son, because he was on formula at the end of his first year, and that was his primary food source. And they told me it was like October, or I think it was October. They said, well, you need what's a reasonable amount. And I said, yep, I have a reasonable amount. And they said, well, this is too many bottles. And I said, based on who? Like, he has to have bottled water. It has to be room temperature. It has to be available. Here's the thing. No matter what time of year you're flying, you need to make sure you have food for your child if you're stuck on a plane for 3 hours. And the week before my trip, my aunt had been stuck on the tarmac for 3 hours. And this is in September in Denver, Colorado. There's no reason she should have been stuck on a plane, but there was something awry. She was stuck on a plane. So make sure you have enough diapers and food to feed your infant or your young eater for an extended time to be stuck on a plane. So ultimately, I got through with my water. My husband was concerned that I was going to be taken back into a little room, but you are allowed with TSA to take a reasonable amount of liquids for your toddler or baby. And so you can hold true to that to make sure that you have enough to get through, because you don't know what's going to be provided on the plane, and you can't not feed your child.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You have to kind of I generally multiply the time of the flight by 3 and make sure I'm prepared for that.
Yeah, that's a great rule of thumb. And diapers, there are those cruises that have issues, right? Or if there's a storm that comes through, especially late August cruise, you just never know. You could be on the ship a couple of extra days. It's really tough to get by with a baby without diapers, unless you're already doing reusable diapers. I don't remember what those are called, the real name for them. But if you're doing disposables, bring enough for several extra days. And what we did for that is we just counted the number of days before our trip, or the number of diapers we used in a day. and then added to that and brought, packed those with us when we would go.
This is your first time traveling with a young child on the airlines. You can always go to each one of the airlines' websites. They've got information about traveling with children and especially infants. And you can always go to tsa.gov and get information about what you can and cannot bring through security. Of course, that changes airport to airport, as we see in America, because we are the land of the free, and they can make things up from airport to airport, but that's a whole nother topic. So you guys get down to Orlando. Where'd you guys stay, Joe?
So we stayed at the Hyatt Place at the airport just for that one night beforehand.
Very convenient.
Definitely. And then how'd you guys get out to the port, having young kids once again? I know that's always kind of a concern, whether you bring car seats, taking a bus out there. How'd you guys get out to the airport?
Yeah, so we actually decided to rent a one-way car with Hertz. With Hertz, if you have a AAA card, you can get one free car seat. And luckily, we only have one child. All three of our children need car seats, but we only have one child who we need to actually rent a car seat for. Like, once those car seats get the convertible car seats, they're super huge and you don't want to bring them along. But my oldest daughter, she can use the booster. The baby was still in that infant carrier, like a snap and go type thing. So we had those two covered, and then we got the free car rental seat from Hertz through AAA. And so, it was nice to have a car because we could go according to our own time, but also, we swung by Wilderness Lodge and had dinner at Whispering Canyon that night that we were hanging out before the cruise. So, we decided that was the best way to go. In the end, I think we saved like $150, $200 off of Disney transfers. Disney transfers are super convenient and useful, but I don't know. I just wanted to try something new, I guess.
After you dropped off the car, the kid, did you drop off the family actually and then the car, or did you guys all drop off the car together?
Yeah, so if you want to get to embarkation, there are some interesting stories that have to go with what happened there.
Go for it.
I don't know if you want to move on yet. Yeah, so I had this brilliant idea, which I guess it wasn't super stupid, but it wasn't as brilliant as I thought it was. But I was like, well, my son loves riding shuttle buses. So I dropped we should have said that, my oldest daughter is 5, my son is 3, and the baby was about to be 1. I'm not sure if we said that, so we should get that out there. But anyway, I dropped my wife and the 2 girls, the 5-year-old and the baby, off at Port Canaveral. And I was like, yeah, just wait in line for security, and then we'll meet you when we get inside. And then I took my son, and we returned the car, and he was super happy on the Hertz rental shuttle and stuff like that. He loved it. He was like, oh, we're going to be on a bus and then on a boat. Like, it was like, it's the best day of his entire life. Of course, once my wife and 2 daughters got through security. Oh, and we actually booked 2 staterooms adjoining just with the baby. We just didn't think that one stateroom was going to be enough for us. And we weren't ready to spend an extra $5,000 per concierge. So, this was like kind of the happy medium. So the girls were all together on the same room. And what happened is, I'm sure if you've been to Port Canaveral, once she got through security, she started getting shuttled into the check-in line. So she ended up checking in. And in fact, she got onto the boat like 25 minutes before us. But she was like a first-time Disney cruiser, and it is like a huge crush of people. She was dealing with 2 kids. The baby was in the stroller, and she was like super stressed out getting in there. Like, because in my stupid plan, I was like, oh yeah, just get up there and wait, and then when we get there, we'll all check in together. But she just kind of like moved all the way through, and she couldn't find our friends either, so she was on her own. She didn't hook up with our friends until she got onto the boat, and so she was just, it was like a lot of stress for her to be navigating that on her own, the 2 kids. Normally, I don't think that the check-in process is like super stressful, but if you are outnumbered with your kids and you haven't done it before, you could be. Because I was like, our daughter's a Silver Castaway Club member, so you should be able to go on the Silver Castaway Club line. And she's like, they're just shuttling me in this direction. And so, so she had a lot of stress there. And so what I would say is, I think if we had to do it again, I would have just had us all return the car together, even though it was more stuff, or have her wait outside for us as we're coming back, because the 3 girls, they're pretty good at entertaining themselves. It's my son who gets restless. So, that's how embarkation went.
So some points on some of those topics. So basically, if somebody is renting a car, the options are, like we discussed, everybody goes together and returns the car, or you divide up and then check in or not check in, and however that goes. Another option, just for people with little kids to consider, and this is what we often do, and man, it's so convenient, is we just use a hired car. So the thing with Disney transportation, we've done that before, and that's cute because they have the cute little video and all that for the kids. And you are not allowed, just so people know, to have a car seat on the Disney buses. So if you have a car seat age child, you hold them and or you place them in a seat if they're big enough to sit on their own in the seat. But with buses, there is no seatbelt and no place to plug in a car seat. So you don't have a car seat. If you want a car seat, you do the rent a car or you hire a car. Hiring a car, I believe, is like $80 to the port from the airport. And then there's usually a tip involved. So that's something to keep in mind. But man, they just drop you right at the door. They'll have a car seat for you if you hire one with a car seat for as many kids as you have. And so that's one way to get there. And then they just drop off the whole family. We did the rental car, the one-way rental once or twice and did the car seat. And one time we were waiting for the car seat on the way back and they did not have a car seat for us. So we were at Hertz or Alamo, one of those two, waiting there. And they're like, well, we're out of car seats. And I had my 8-month-old or 10-month-old in the carrier, like just attached to me, going, well, you see, we're about to get in your car and we have to place him somewhere. They're like, yeah, we don't have one. I'm like, well, I reserved one. So what do we do about that? So actually another person in line behind us also needed a car seat. So they went down the road, picked up car seats from, it was either the other of the Hertz or the Alamo. And this is, I guess, what they do. And they just share car seats. So I guess that's just something. So we had to wait for the car seat and then install it. We kind of found that process, though, to be kind of a pain. And I think it was after that we're like, yeah, it might cost a little bit more for the hired car, but man, it is easy to just hop in the car and go. Or hop out of the car and get on the cruise and not take the bus with the people and all that. So that's just another way. Especially if you have kids, and especially if you have multiple kids. Because that just adds to the amount of juggling that you have to do.
We actually looked into renting I guess it was more like a van for all three families. And, it definitely came out to being cheaper than if we had all done the Disney bus transfers. And they what they do is they put you all in a van and they have like a trailer dragging behind, with all your luggage in it. So I think that's something that I would recommend people looking into as well. I think we got our quote from mousesavers.com has like a Disney Cruise Line transfer section, and they had I think someone they partner with, but they have the link there. But we were pretty happy with the price that they were giving us, and we almost did that. But then one of us realized that we had a corporate rate with who we work for. It ended up being cheaper with the one-way rentals for the three families with the corporate rate.
Well, before we talk about the cruise itself, and once you finally get together back on board with your wife and daughters, let's talk a little bit quick about things that you can reserve before you get on board. Now, obviously, you can reserve your shore excursions, and we're talking about younger kids here. Disney does a really good job of looking at the different shore excursions of putting an age limit on each one. I will say that some people's kids are probably a little bit more adventurous and are able to do some of the things that Disney limits. So if that is a factor, like our kids have kayaked since they were 3, I think Disney puts a limit of like about 8 or 9 on kayaking excursions. You may think about looking at booking things outside of Disney, but that's just one thing to think of. The other main thing traveling with an infant is the nursery itself, and you can actually book that ahead of time on the days that you plan on using it. It's also linked to what status you are as far as Castaway Club. So looking at it here, Concierge and Platinum can book it 120 days prior, Gold 105 days prior, Silver 90, and then everybody else, first-time cruisers, 75 days. Now, and I'm not sure, did you do that at all, Joe?
Yeah, so in terms of the excursions, I should say up front that we booked the Disney cruise with the idea that we were just going to be mostly relaxing and we didn't want to do like a lot of excursions. So our plan was just to spend most of the time on the ship and then on Castaway Cay, of course. So we didn't look too closely. Actually, I didn't look at all into excursions. I think I looked at some day hotels in Nassau, and that's about it. We did book nursery space in advance. So you can, when you're doing the whole check-in thing, you can, like in the same way that you would book princess meet and greets and things like that, you can book nursery time. So we booked nursery time to coincide with the time that we had scheduled to go to Palo for brunch. And our thinking was you can basically cancel your nursery up until the day before. But we had read that, sometimes nursery space is at a premium and you can't get the space at the time you want when you're actually on the ship. So we just figured safer to book ahead. And there was no real, it's like they don't charge you a deposit or anything. So there was no real cost there. We ended up not using the nursery, though I did take a look inside there and it looks really great. But we ended up not using the nursery because one of our friends offered to babysit. So, we just took them up on it.
You can actually cancel 4 hours prior to your reservation time. So it's actually not even a day prior. So it's up to 4 hours prior. Within 4 hours, you're going to forfeit your fee. It's right now it's $4.50 per half hour, so $9 for an hour for the first child, $4 for every child afterwards. The nursery is 1 to 3 once again, age-wise. Or if your child is, I think it's just 1 to 3, right, Christy? So to get in the
yes, but I believe if your kid is not potty trained and they're in that 3-year-old range, then they can still go to the nursery.
That's where I was going with it. So to use the regular kids clubs, they have to be potty trained. So the nursery is an option if your child is not potty trained, right around that 3-year range. And I'm not sure how far they would extend that out past 3, I guess. So those are just some of the things to think about that you can book beforehand. There's actually, I'm just looking at the nursery website too. They give you a lot of information like what to bring that they do not provide.
We did another show about it, so people can go back. When we talked about the kids club, we talked about it. But if you're using a nursery, we used it one time for a couple hours to go see Frozen, actually. And you need to bring diapers. You need to bring whatever food your child needs to eat during that period of time. I think an extra set of clothing. So whatever the kid needs, they will put the babies down for a nap. They have cribs in the back. They will put the babies down to sleep at nighttime if you are using them for nighttime sleeping. So like if your kid uses a special blanket or something like that, you can bring that. Everything is labeled. If you don't label it, they'll put a little sticker on it. We actually still have a couple of stickers on a couple of my son's things from when he was in the nursery, and I just cannot remove the sticker because it's so cute. I mean, it's not even a special sticker. It just is a tiny little sticker that says Blake, but it makes us think of his first cruise.
And I guess the last thing, just looking at it too, they definitely put this out there too. The minimum age to sail aboard Disney Cruise Line is 6 months of age on the day of sailing. However, there's some longer sailings like the Transatlantic and the Panama Canal where your child's going to have to be 1 year of age on the day of sailing. So
yeah, I believe it's anything over 7 days they have to be. Although the 9 days ones I'm not entirely sure about, so you can look that up. But otherwise, it's 6 months unless it's a longer cruise. Then it is 1 year.
Perfect. So those are just some of the things to think about before the cruise that you can book too. And as Joe said, I think that's like the perfect time to use it. Palo dinner, Palo brunch, Remy, or some other special occasion that you might be celebrating on the ship where it's going to be tough to have your baby or toddler with you. Well, let's move into the ship itself. So you missed your family actually coming on board in the welcoming, huh, Joe?
Oh yeah, I think when they went on, they got welcome, Chung family. By the time my son and I got on, he was fine. By the way, he was like just super into it, walking through the giant Mickey head and stuff like that. But by the time my son and I got on, I was like, I got to go find my wife like ASAP. So I just like blew past them. Like I think they ask you your name. Right? That's how they know how to do it? Or you tap your key to the world?
No, they ask you your name.
Yeah, I just like blew right by that guy. I was like, gotta go. So I figured my son wouldn't notice anyway, and like I don't need to be announced for myself. So we went to go find them, and yeah, I would say I think if you were to ask my wife and really to ask me, the one kind of negative day was that embarkation day because after that we went up to Cabanas to get lunch, and it was just like crazy out there. And of course it's August too, so it was hot. And so, the 3 families, we kind of just got like split up. Like we had mistakenly assumed that we'd all get to eat together. But it's just too crazy that first day. It was too crowded. So we ended up finding a table like right by Nemo's splash pad. And so, we just shuttled food back and forth from there. At that point, my wife, I could see on her face that I was like, to me, it's like I got to sell her on Disney Cruise so that we can go back. And I was like, oh, this is not going well. So I was like, hey, there's an adults only area. I'm just going to watch the 3 kids for like the next 20 minutes and you go take a walk and, just do whatever you have to do. Just go to the area that has like no children in it. And so that's exactly what she did. So she took a walk for about 20 minutes. And when she came back, she looked a lot better. She looked a lot calmer, a lot more relaxed. And she was like, thanks for doing that. And now I'm like, this is what I would recommend, families, if it's getting too overwhelming, because, if you think about it, obviously no one's in their staterooms. So every single living soul on that ship is out and about, and 90% of them are on the pool deck. So if you need that time to kind of de-stress, split up your family, have one of the adults just hang out in the adult only area for a little while, get a drink, whether alcoholic or even just water. And, I think that can really, that really saved that day, and it possibly saved Disney Cruise Line overall for my wife. Because, after we got into the stateroom and things like that, everything was amazing, as it always is.
I think that as a general rule, that transition day, especially with little kids, is tough. Anytime you're like moving from one place, I sort of, whatever your home base is, you're moving from one to another. It's just, I find it difficult and we only have the one kid. I just find it a little bit difficult on everybody involved.
Yeah, no arguments here.
Travel in general is just stressful. So yeah, good on you for giving her that free time to be able to kind of go chill out a little bit, collect your thoughts, and then get back into the fun. So, well, let's talk about your stateroom. You said you guys booked 2 that were and I'm guessing they were next to each other?
Yeah, so I want to say they are category 5C. Christy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the smaller veranda staterooms, and they were 2 connecting rooms. So, we basically had, we left the 2 doors open in between like all the time. And so there's 2 of us officially in one stateroom and 3 of us in the other one.
So let's talk about the staterooms itself. How did that work for you guys as far as, now I know you said the girls were all in one room and you and your son were in the other. How did it work as far as like setting up all your stuff, getting everything unpacked, and how did that work, I guess? And I know, Christy, you got some tips here as well as far as for people traveling with younger kids to bring with their stateroom stuff.
The names were like all on paper. I would say we are a family that is fairly comfortable co-sleeping when we're on the road, which is useful when you're in tight spots, but also leads to a lot of kind of like musical beds. So I couldn't even tell you who slept with who on what night. The only thing I can guarantee you is that I did not spend a single night in the same bed with my wife. I can tell you that much.
God.
But aside from, and then the baby, she was good. She slept in the crib. Yeah, we should say this now, like request beforehand. But if you forget to request beforehand, ask your stateroom attendant. But like, when we showed up, there was a crib already set up. There was a diaper champ already set up, which is all we had asked for. But you can also ask for like bottle warmers and other kid-related things, and even a stroller, although you have to go down to guest services to get that.
And there's a limited number of strollers.
Yeah, and we didn't get that. Like, oh yeah, another big regret. We did not need to bring. So we brought our caddy and the Snap and Go caddy, or we actually have a Chico, but whatever, onto the boat. Like, we did not need to bring that thing on the boat. It did not come back out. It came out. It was there on embarkation day, and it did not come back out until debarkation day. So that was like a waste of space. Although I guess we would have had nowhere to leave it on shore.
And you need it kind of at the airport, and you potentially need it at Castaway Cay. Those are the only things. Like, those are the days we used our stroller. We didn't use it much during the actual cruises. My son went on like 3 or 4 cruises before he was 2. So that was basically our protocol for all of those. Sometimes we would use them in port, but they can fold and go right under your bed. That's usually where it went. Sometimes my mom would, when he was an infant, my mom would walk him in the stroller for like nap times and stuff when that was occurring, because most of his cruises were week-long cruises too. So I know for some of the shorter ones, people just let the nap times and all that go. But if you're there a week, that's kind of hard for your kid. At least it's hard for my kid. I mean, we've always kept his schedule just because he's a happier kid that way. So just another, I guess, point of view is those are the times that we've used the stroller.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. We needed the stroller for the airport, so I guess that's why we had it. But if there was like a way, so we were staying at the Poly for a couple nights after. I think if I did it again, I might just like see if they take it at Bell Services at the Poly, and that we just pick it up when we get back.
I don't think, well, yeah.
Well, if they wouldn't, then I'd be stuck with it, and that's fine.
Right.
But if there was a way that I could have not had the stroller, I would have liked to not have it. Because if our baby was heavier, then I couldn't have put her in a carrier for all of Castaway Cay. But she is light enough that I knew that wasn't going to be a problem, even in 90-degree heat.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to your question, Steve. In terms of unpacking and stuff like that, having connecting staterooms for a family of 5, I think that will be our way to go until the kids are a lot older, because what we could do is we could pile everyone into the stateroom, and then parent A or B could unpack and make sure everything gets set up in the other stateroom. And then, like Christy said, there's plenty of room under the beds to fit all our luggage and stuff like that. We travel fairly light as a family. That's something we've always done. Like, we didn't start checking bags until we had a second child. We don't have a ton of stuff. We are perfectly happy doing laundry on board the ship, which we did. Actually did it twice because with kids, you go through more laundry than you would expect. And so that's kind of how we handled clothes and stuff in the stateroom.
Any other tips for the stateroom, Christy, before we move on to food?
In terms of laundry, at least, I say bring the little pods to do your own laundry, and with a brand that's similar to whatever you use at home, so that if you need to do laundry whether you're planning to or not, we typically don't plan to do laundry, but there are maybe more accidents or whatever the situation is where you might need to. So I always pack at this point laundry pods, because they're small and the kind I buy don't leak. And so they just throw 2 of them in the bottom of the suitcase. So I'd say bring that. Like Joe was saying, Disney will provide automatically a diaper genie to put your messy diapers into your stateroom, which is really nice. If you have a diaper-age child, they will give you a pack and play, or they have bed rails. So by the time my son was 2, he was still sleeping in a crib at home, but the pack and play was just a little bit small. So we just used the bed rails for the little fold-out couch bed, and that seemed to work really well. And your stateroom attendant will just ask you what your preference is. They'll bring you a bottle steamer, basically, so that you can clean your bottles. The other thing we would pack in the room is we would usually have a bucket so that my son can play with it anyway. And we bring now they have those Downy Bounty with Dawn, that's what it's called, paper towels. So back then before they had those, we would bring soap and a little sponge thing to wash up his sippy cups or bottles or things like that. Plus maybe use the steamer when he was still an actual infant. Now they have those. So I would recommend anybody with kids, or if you're a reusable cup user, man, we take those on every trip still. So they're Bounty paper towels with Dawn dish soap. That's a tongue twister. Dish soap in it. So then you just take one out and you can wash your dishes. And so you want to be prepared for how you're going to clean the things that you bring. For little kids, you also should consider bringing silverware, because Disney, besides whatever regular silverware people are used to, they don't have any kid-sized. I mean, they have the smaller forks, but those are tough for like 1-year-olds or 2-year-olds that still maybe aren't the best eaters. So we would bring our own silverware when he was a young toddler and an infant as well. So those are just things packing wise that we would bring that was extra.
Thinking about it, Joe, was there anything that you guys wish you would have had or wish you would have brought with that you did not have with you?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, definitely. I was going to say dish detergent is good. Normally we bring our own laundry detergent, but as it goes with packing, like we deliberately ended up leaving it at home. And, I know you can pay, it's like $1 for detergent on the ship, so we decided that we were going to eat that. So we pretty much had everything.
I think it's $2 now, just so people know, though.
I can't remember. It was at a level that I was like, I'm not going to worry about, because we don't use powdered detergent at home. So I was like, I don't want to worry about stuff, breaking open in our suitcase or anything like that. So yeah, I think generally every time we take a trip, we forget one thing, but we did pretty well this last time. So I was pretty happy.
Before we go into the food, just one more thing. If you're listening to our show for the first time and haven't listened to the Kids Club, DCL 101 that we did, I recommend you go back and listen to that one. But for the nurseries are the only kids club that are at a cost above what you've already paid for the cruise. So just an FYI there. And then hours-wise, they tend to vary. Check your personal navigator each day. But generally, the nurseries open 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. And from 8 to 9 a.m., usually in the morning, they have open time, so you can go and play with your child down there in the nursery before they close it up at 9 a.m. But those hours can vary, so make sure you check your navigator on that. So, well, let's move into dining. How was your dining experience, thinking about having 2 younger kids and then a baby Joe?
Yeah, so I'll say, if that embarkation day almost ruined Disney Cruise for life, for my wife, dining is what may have sold her, not for life, but for a significant amount of the time. At least until my kids are too old to have us worry about that anymore. our dining experience was, frankly, it was top notch. So everyone knows that it's rotational dining. So you have the same service team with you over the whole 4 nights. And they were great. Like, they would provide everything we need. And, the thing that really stood out to us was for the baby, they were like, what does the baby want to eat? This is the first night. And we're like, I guess she likes avocado. And then, 5 minutes later, there was like, it was an entire chopped up avocado. And
the most food that you could ever serve somebody. It was,
especially someone of that
of
size. Yeah. Right. And I was joking. I was like, this is too much. And he was like, well, if they're going to cut up an avocado, they're just going to give you the whole thing. So here you go.
It didn't matter, though, what you were getting. You got too much. Like, we got peas one day. We got too much. We got those, what are those little brown things, chickpeas. We got chickpeas one day. We got the most ridiculous amount of chickpeas. We even said, look, we just need a teeny tiny amount. Nope, you get a ridiculous amount every time.
Yeah, they definitely know how to, like any good cruise, they know how to deal with excess. So, but then what was even better was, like, after that first night, at the end of the night, so at the end of the first night, he was like, do you want avocado again? And then the next day we showed up and there was like avocado already at the table, which is great. Like, if you have an infant, that sometimes they need to eat like immediately. And so, from that point on, every night when we showed up, whatever we asked for, there was raspberries one night, blueberries another night, but like that food would be there before we even sat down. And so that was amazing. And then, for the older kids, same kind of thing. So our older kids aren't that picky, but some of the kids that we were traveling with were pretty picky. And, the great thing about Disney Cruise Line is, of course, unless it's one of those nights where all 3 restaurants are doing the same menu, you can basically ask for anything from any menu. And so the other kids in our party utilized that a lot. They were like obsessed with escargot. So they had that twice. But they had that twice instead of just the once.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, and our service team was amazing. They basically knew what our kids wanted and needed to a T by like the second day. So they're just really on top of everything. We didn't have any, service gaffes, so we never had to deal with the head waiter, I think is the terminology for the person who says hi to you like 2 times, then you have to give them a tip.
Yes. He works well, though, if you have a dining allergy.
Yeah.
Well.
So I know that, like, if you have issues or a dining allergy, that's when he or she comes into play. And so, yeah, we really loved all of our dining experiences. I personally, did not realize that all 4 ships have different themed animators palettes. So I was like very pleasantly surprised when I went into animators palette and realized that it was like totally different than the one I had been in on the Wonder. So that was a lot of fun for myself and my daughter who had been on the Wonder before.
The head waiter was actually the one you didn't know, but that got you your baby food too, because they're the ones that do the tickets for the special food, which baby food qualifies.
I promise you I did not stiff them on the tip, Kristen.
No, I'm not saying. Just was not implying that at all.
I just want to make sure that's out there on the record.
A couple of points on food for infants or young toddlers or any eater, really. If there's something on the menu you don't want, they will get it for you. But for infants, they don't have quote unquote baby food. So if you need, obviously your kid would be 6 months old by the time they cruise. They don't have baby cereal or things like that. If a person needs any of those things, they do need to bring that themselves. You can bring jarred food, which I know we brought with us when my son was 10 months old, just to have some. But they will puree anything you ask them to. If you want, quote unquote, liquid food for your kid, they will make it, but it has to be something that they have on the ship. So just so people are prepared for that. Celebrity Cruise Line actually will, if you have an infant, gives you like a ordering sheet, and 45 days before your cruise, you give them the ordering sheet and they will give you formula and baby food, like actual containers of baby food for your kid. But they're the only ones that do that I know of.
That's great to know. It's like funny, like with our first kid, we were like all into the purees, and then for the second, third, we're like, you can probably mash this in your mouth yourself. So here you go.
One of those timing. We don't have as much time, so eat this, child, and like it.
Yep. We cut the grapes in half. You're not going to choke. Here you go.
Another thing I'm kind of thinking of as you guys are talking about dining is you could always use room service as well. if you're just having one of those days, kids are tired.
Yes, but I realize you didn't cruise with your kid. You have to then have them eat the food like on the bed or something like that. Kids have to eat, and then they have to eat in the space that is there. So that makes it a little
It's
more
true. We did do that. So, they lay your food on kind of like that. It's not an ottoman, but like that ottoman / coffee table type thing
right.
that's in
and
front of your couch.
case.
And storage case, yep. And so, we had, that's when, like, it definitely would have been tight if we only had one stateroom, but since we had the 2 staterooms, we kind of moved everything out of the way, and the kids just sat on the floor and ate, and my wife and I sat on the couch. I think we kind of ate in shifts, but we did try that out one night. Not one night. We tried it once for lunch, and it worked pretty well. Although, I will say, I'd heard about room service and I was pretty excited, but I was mildly disappointed with the menu. It's just pretty standard stuff. Like, I think we got chicken noodle soup, like a hot dog, mac and cheese, something for the adults. I don't remember what, but it wasn't, like a salad we got for the adults. But it wasn't like, it was good food. And, since it's room service, usually you have to pay for room service like everywhere else in the world, but it's included in the cost of your cruise. You just have to tip the guy who drops it off or woman who drops it off. So, in that sense, it was great, but it's not at the same quality, of course, as the dining rooms themselves.
For sure. Just one more little thing is we would bring, when my kid was younger, a disposable bibs with us because he was a messy eater and it was just easier. You could use the reusable ones, but we decided that for that particular moment, we were just trying to go for simple. So we'd bring those and then could just throw them out after the meal. And then they also had those disposable placemats before he was using, or when he was in that weird stage where they'd pick up the plate and like throw it or whatever. We would put the disposable placemat when there wasn't another tablecloth down for him to eat, to make it easier as well for him to eat off the table.
The worst stage, throwing the plate stage.
Yeah, that might be your 18-month-old stage.
Yeah, it is. So, and then the thing I would say is, like, we are pretty strict about food and dessert and stuff like that at home. But if you're going to be on a Disney cruise, my recommendation would be just let your kids have at it. If they want a Mickey bar and the creme brulee, just do it. You're there for 4 nights. You've paid like thousands of dollars. Just let the kids have fun, even if you pay for it later.
Yeah, I think my youngest had 10 ice cream cones was his record one day on our last cruise. So yeah, you gotta let him have a little bit of fun too.
Yeah, there you go. You're doing it right.
So, all right. Well, let's talk about entertainment around the ship. So what were some of the things that you were able to do with your kids that you guys enjoyed, from the pools to maybe Dash's diaper dash or any of those kind of things? What did you guys do, Joe?
We didn't do any like baby specific stuff. I think the baby was just happy. She was just happy to be there.
You got it in.
But I'm serious. She was just like, it was a new environment. She was having a lot of fun. We didn't actually have her in the pool once, but she loved Castaway Cay. She just had a blast with all the different experiences, all the different sights and sounds that there were. My son, the 3-year-old, and my daughter, the 5-year-old, they loved being in the pools. I, of course, did not love going to the pools with them because it is just crazy in there, especially, on the day at sea. We did the aqueduct, myself and my daughter. And I do think that Nemo's splash pad is really great for, that's the name of it, right, Christy?
Yes.
Yeah, it is really great for younger kids. Like, my son went on that mini water slide.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he was just like back and forth on that thing. They just had a blast there.
My kid still loves it. It's still his preferred. He is a little timid and will not go on those bigger slides. And he was just on it again over Labor Day, and he loves that slide.
Yeah, it does look like a lot of fun if I was that small. The other things that we did, so my wife took them to, my kids went to a couple of the like arts and crafts things. Like, they made like a paper model of the ship at one point. I think they made some jewelry at some other point. They really liked kind of just happening, or like they checked out the Navigator and saw what arts and crafts were going on, and they really liked going to those things. I will give a note about the shows. I think Beauty and the Beast was a little bit too intense for both my son and my daughter. They're just like running in the woods with the wolves, and it just got to be a little bit too much for them. So my daughter sat through it, but my son, I had to take him out. we had my son skip this, but my daughter really loved Believe. She said it was like her favorite show ever, and she's a patron of the theater. She loves the theater. And so she said Believe was like the best show. She would not shut up for it for like 3 days. She kept telling me about it because I didn't get to go because I was watching my son and the baby in the room. And so, but I would just definitely say for the shows, kind of ask around, get a feel for what happens in them and decide, whether they might be too intense for your kids or not. But in general, my kids really do love the shows because for the most part, they try to make them kid friendly. Just Beauty and the Beast was like a little bit much.
And the times are, tough too for the younger kids, depending on what their normal schedule is. We've talked about it before that during the times where they've had a matinee, actually my son's first cruise, they had Aladdin as a matinee, which was awesome because we could go to that. Otherwise, he's basically in bed. I mean, the nighttime show, if you go to first seating, the second show is at 8:30, and even still, the child's asleep typically by 8:30. So that has always been tough schedule-wise for us.
Any other entertainment stuff that you guys took in while you were on the ship then, Joe?
Sail away party and then the pirate party and the fireworks. My older daughter went to both of those. My son went to the sail away party, but they just really love stuff like that. They love the energy. It's like a lot of fun. The cast members do a great job hyping up these young children into a frenzy. And so, they really enjoy that stuff. Like I feel like stuff like that on Disney Cruise Line, that's the kind of stuff that you don't want to miss. Even if your kid doesn't nap, you make them take a nap so they can stay up late for the fireworks. That's the kind of thing you want to do.
One thing that we don't really talk about too much on this show, I think, and I think part of it is, I'll be completely honest, my kids have never been interested in the characters, which sounds kind of crazy that we're going on Disney Cruise Line and they're not interested in the characters. But did you guys have a chance to meet them, and what did your kids think of that?
Yeah, my kids are the opposite. They are like super into it. And so, we booked the Frozen meet and greet and then the Princess meet and greet. We booked that at 105 Days Out or whatever as Silver Castaway Club members. And so we went to those two. But then we spent, maybe 3 hours over the course of the cruise just waiting in line for characters. But the way we got around it is we would always just go 10 minutes before. If you wait 10 minutes before, you're like second or third or fourth in line. And so you barely have to wait once it starts. And then we just go to the next one because, on the navigator, it says when everyone's going to show up. So we must have met with like 12 or 13 characters. And, my kids had a blast doing that. They brought their autographed books that they have from Disney World. And so they had a lot of fun. It's only like people like Mickey, where even if you line up super early, like 10 minutes is not early enough. But, like the Disney Junior people like Doc McStuffins, we were there like 10 minutes early and it was like no problem. So the kids really do love meeting the characters, and it's part of like the fun and the draw for them. I will say another thing that my daughter really got into, the 5-year-old, and you might be able to do it with like a younger toddler depending on whether they're into it or not. But we did that. Oh, shoot, I forgot what it's called. But where you go to the paintings and you're like solving these mysteries.
Oh, the Midship Detective.
Yes, the Midship Detective Agency. Yeah, we had a lot of fun doing that. Of course, we were doing that at like 11 p.m. on the last night, but we had to finish the case. But, we had a blast.
Those are just on the fantasy or Dream Class ships, just so people know. So the Midship Detective is not on the classic ships.
Any other tips or tricks as far as meeting the characters, Christy?
They close the lines 15 minutes after the start. So just something to keep in mind. You can't get into line after the 15 minutes after the start, if that makes sense. There's usually like open space, I guess, where the kids can kind of play and run around while the parent, or especially if they're divided, then one kid can go, or the kids can go and run with the other parent, and the other parent can stand in line so that everybody is not just standing in line.
Another cool thing that I've watched them do, you can buy the photo package. So just like Walt Disney World, you can get all these photos and as part of a package that you can prepay for. But they will also use your own phone and take pictures as well. So you don't have to buy the photo package if you don't want to. I've seen that happen.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, just like at Disney World. Disney World, we usually get Memory Maker, but it's just too much on the cruise for the amount of pictures you end up getting.
Yeah, and I would tell people, too, especially for a first cruise, and if it's a shorter cruise, to really think about whether the picture package makes sense, because you will want the pictures. If you're spending... Do you remember what it cost, Joe?
I think it was like $230 for digital everything.
Okay, and then my Panama Canal cruise, I feel like it was like 350. And for that cruise, because it was so long, I did it. And we had never ordered the picture package before and would just go and buy a picture or two that we would want for their $20 a picture. But the thing with a shorter cruise, something to keep in mind, if you get the prepackaged, so if you pay the 200 and whatever it was, you're going to want the pictures, which means you're going to want to stand in line for all the people. And for a short cruise, maybe you don't want to do that. So at least for the 3-night cruise, because it's just such a short cruise. So I guess that analyze the cost versus, is this going to make you then spend your whole time standing in line because you paid for the picture to get the picture, versus what is it that you really want to do on your trip? And if it is stand in line to get the picture, then perfect. But just because it's an option that exists doesn't mean it's something you have to do. And I guess that's just my little point, that I feel like people worry because, oh, the fish extender is an option, which we'll still continue to talk about another show. That's the bringing gifts to exchange with other people in a voluntary basis, or whatever is an option. And so I have to do it because it is an option. You pick and choose what you want to do for your family. That is an option to make it a more enjoyable experience for you. The one other thing that you can pre-register for that wasn't discussed, because it's a 4-night cruise, it's not offered, but on the longer cruises, they do have a character breakfast that is included in your cruise fare that you have to pre-register for prior to the cruise. If it is sold out, then you can go to the shore excursion desk when you get on the ship and try to get a time. And you can go to the shore excursion desk as well for the princess meet and greets as soon as you get on the ship that first day, if you weren't able to get a time for either the Anna or Elsa or the princesses, which are, again, no charge experiences, but you do have to have a ticket to go.
Well, so you guys didn't book any shore excursions on your day in Nassau, but I'm guessing you guys got off in Castaway Cay. So let's talk about Castaway Cay, what you guys planned, what you did, and what your thoughts for that with having kids.
You know, I'll say this. We went into this trip knowing that we were going to take things easy and that our enjoyment on the trip was going to be a function on how easy we were taking things. And so, you know, I went into Castaway Cay knowing I basically went on shore and I was like, I'm probably going to be back here by lunch because the baby's not going to want to stay out there for that long. And that is exactly what happened. I went back with the baby around 11:30 a.m. and, you know, we had a nice little date in Cabanas while the kids stayed with mom on the beach with all the other kids and all the other families. And so, you know, we had a blast on Castaway Cay. We had a lot of fun in the sand and the water. I took my oldest daughter, on Pelican Plunge for the first time, and she came off crying, but she did it.
Oh.
She suggested doing it, by the way. I didn't force her or anything. I like to force her to go on rides, but like for this one, I was like, you know, it's up to you. And she brought it up to me. She's like, oh, can we go on that? And then, of course, when she landed at the bottom of Pelican Plunge, she was crying. So she was crying and swimming. She can swim, and kids that are under like 10 have to wear life vests anyway. So she was crying and swimming all the way back to shore, which was sad and funny at the same time. But yeah, we really enjoyed it. The kids really liked, they ate at Cookies too. They had a good time there. You know, but our kids just love being on the beach in the sand. And, you know, what I love about Castaway Cay is that, you know, it's kind of like if you go on shore anywhere else, you kind of don't know, like, are these people trying to rip me off? Like, is this a scam? Like, you kind of have that little bit of unease. The nice thing about Castaway Cay is you know that it's Disney scamming you the whole time. So you can just rest easy knowing that if you do get scammed, it's just Disney's normal upcharge, like selling you $15 sand buckets. You know,
yeah, but those are cute sand buckets.
They are cute, but they are also $15. We brought our own. I think Steve, you asked if I regretted not bringing anything. I kind of do regret bringing our own sand buckets, but there was a little corner in the suitcase, so we stuffed them in there. You know, you stuff socks and underwear inside the bucket, and it fits fine. But yeah, so, you know, we had a lot of fun on Castaway Cay, but I would say that, like, if you are a family who, like, wants to maximize your Castaway Cay time, like, if you as adults would maximize your Castaway Cay time and stay until, like, the last tram comes back, you know, if you're traveling with young kids, you're probably not going to get to do that. And
unless
you kind of have to,
cabana.
Unless you have a cabana, of course. But even then, like, it's just kids, right? Like, they don't last as long as adults for a lot of things. So you might have to go back early. And so you kind of just have to be ready to roll with the punches. And one reason why I love the parks and I love taking my kids to the parks, but one reason why I find Disney Cruise Line a lot less stressful is because I don't feel that pressure to, like, if I didn't get to ride Dumbo or something, I don't feel like I missed out. I feel like it's just so much more relaxed and chill that, I'm just enjoying the overall experience. And I'm not trying to like maximize everything like I do in the parks, with my touring plans, and like I'm, booking my 4th, 5th, and 6th fast passes and all that stuff. And so that's what I really love about going on Disney Cruise with the kids. We're just in a great positive environment where we can be as a family and we can do as much or as little as we want. And, we can be happy either way.
I agree.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, a lot of it's expectations, going to France and going to the Louvre with a 3-year-old. You're not going to be there for 12 hours looking at all the great artwork. You're lucky if you get an hour in maybe. And I think you said it perfectly, Joe. Just kind of managing your expectations as you went in. You guys had a great plan. You're going to go out there, have a lot of fun, and then you'll probably be back at noon. And don't be upset about it. And enjoy it and make the most of it with your family. And I think we've said it before, so many times, that's what makes Disney Cruise Line just so magical. You're around other families kind of in the same boat, and it is very relaxed. If you don't have the pressure that you do or you feel like on other types of vacations, I don't think. So as we kind of wrap up the show and we get to disembarkation, any other things that we haven't touched on before we talk about getting off the ship, Joe, that you wanted to bring up or talk about? No,
I don't think so. I think we've covered it pretty well. The nice thing is just there's always something to do, and there's always also nothing to do if that's what you want to do. And so, I think 3 out of the 4 days we had our kids take naps, and that went fine. But in general, we just chilled. We would split up the family from time to time, so we could get alone time with our kids, and so the older kids could go swimming, and the baby can, go have fun just staring into space because she loved doing that. I will say 9 months is a pretty great time to travel with kids, 6 to 9 months, because at that point they're not really moving yet, but they mostly just sleep and eat.
Your kid.
A lot less of the crying. At least, we're 3 for 3 in that, and that's all the data points that we're going to get. So, but like as soon as our kids start moving, that's like when they start getting a lot more difficult because you got to worry about where they're going and stuff like that.
My son started crawling like with a proper 4-point crawl or whatever at Walt Disney World at 5.5 months old. He was a little mover. Well,
that's what you get for having an overachiever. My nice behind the curve kids. my 1-year-old, she still doesn't crawl properly, and it is great. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Trust me.
I'm like, anytime you want to walk, anytime before 2 years, I'm good. Once you get to 2 years, no, probably 18 months. But like once you get to 18, 21 months, I'll be concerned. Other than that, do you. We
really were sad by that. Because it puts a whole new spin on traveling.
Well, let's talk about disembarkation quick before we wrap up the show. Any thoughts about that as you guys got off the ship, Joe?
Yeah, so I'll say that I went into disembarkation like a lot more prepared. It's not as crazy as embarkation day. We were originally going to plan to just go to Cabanas for breakfast, but all our friends wanted to. I think we were scheduled for Animator's Palette, so they wanted to go to Animator's Palette, so we went to have one last meal with them. And then when we got off, the only thing I would say is like we happily paid for our porter to help us take our bags like all the way to the rental shuttle buses. Like, it is not worth $20 plus tip that it was to have dragged that all ourselves. Even if we had 2 kids, I don't think it would have been worth it. But, with 3, for sure, we're pushing the stroller, and then we have one big suitcase that I'd rather not like navigate around. And so it's just great getting through customs. And Port Canaveral, they have customs, like they have it down to a T. It was like really smooth. I mean, the line was moving, and I think we were out of there in like 15, 20 minutes, and it was no problem.
From there, you guys picked up your rental car and then headed to the Poly, correct?
Yep. So we spent 2 nights at the Poly. Our original plan was not to visit the parks, but I have a friend whose daughter is a cast member, and she like randomly texted me. I don't think she even knew that I was in WDW, but she randomly texted me to see if I could use passes to Hollywood Studios, like cast member passes, like they were expiring at the end of August. And she's like, "Do you happen to be down there?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I am." So we popped into Toy Story Land for a few hours, but other than that, we were mostly just relaxing. I will say that I totally understand why if you're doing land and sea, you go land first and then sea. Because if you go back to what I was saying about the baby, like we did not worry about what to feed the baby for 4 straight nights. And then as soon as we got to the Poly, it's like, oh, we have to buy something else for this kid. I know that we paid for all the food on the cruise with the prices up front, but it's paid for already, so you're not worrying about it. But when we were at the Poly, I was like, oh man, I got to find something for this kid to eat. Like, where's my cut up avocado? And so, it is a bit of a rude awakening. And cast members in Walt Disney World are great, but the crew members, I think, took it to another level, at least on our last experience.
No, they do. It's amazing.
That escargot is pretty expensive at the Poly, I think, too. So.
Yeah, my kids weren't the ones into escargot, so we did not get the maximum value of food on the cruise.
Oh, that wasn't your kids? I thought those were your kids.
No, it was my friend's kids.
Okay, I love the escargot, so go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, yeah, eat more expensive stuff, guys. We paid for it.
Filet mignon every night.
Kids these days, they don't listen.
Yeah, they don't.
So a couple more things before we end the show with traveling with little kids. Think about, we would bring, and we've talked about it before, but we put an app on our phone to make like a white noise sound to be like a fan blowing, because I do feel like those cabins can get a little bit loud. People coming back in the evening or whatever might make a bit of noise, or if your kids are taking a nap. So we'll use the white noise app to make ambient noise to cover up the outside noise, if that makes sense. So download that app before you go. And we also brought something called Motion Ease for my son. It's motion and then the word ease next to it. It's an oil so when he was a baby and couldn't do Dramamine, he did have some motion sickness problems. So to help with the cruise, it's essential oils. You put it behind their ears. We would put that on him, and that actually helped when he was a baby and we did our cruises. The other thing to remember is to bring swim diapers. So if you have children that are not potty trained and you're going to use, 2 points on that. You cannot take non-potty trained kids into the regular pools. You have to be potty trained to use the pool. On any cruise line, it's a law of some sort. But then after that, there is the splash pad. The splash pad can be used by diapered babies and kids under 7, I believe. Basically, they say if your kid, they have to be a supervised child to use the splash pad. So you will want to bring swim diapers specifically for that, and then obviously for Castaway Cay as well. And then when you're on the Magic splash pad is much smaller. So just be prepared for that. It's like a quarter of the size as the one on the Dream and the Fantasy. So if anybody's still going into the splash pad.
Yeah, I think we remember that the Wonder was not as exciting as the Disney Dream was.
Yes, same concept.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming back on. Between now and the next time we talk to you, where can people find you and follow you on social media?
Yeah, the easiest way to connect with me is at As the Joe Flies on Twitter, or basically on all social media. And you can find all the other stuff I do from there. So, at As the Joe Flies is the best way to connect with me.
Well, Joe, as we finish up, the one question I forgot to ask you is, did you guys rebook another cruise while you're on board? Or what are your guys' plans for the future when it comes to DCL?
Yeah, so I think we touched on this on the Miles and Points episode, but at the time I had only booked a placeholder, and so I booked 2 placeholder rooms, so that's a $250 deposit each. And then what I did was I transferred the reservation to Chase, and I just made a deposit with Ultimate Rewards points at 1.5 cents per point for the Disney Magic in 2020, and I am dragging my parents along, and hopefully my sister and her husband and kids along. So April 2020, we're going to be sailing on a 5-night out of Miami on the Magic. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, perfect. As we end the show, once again, thanks for coming on, Joe. Follow him over at milestothemagic.com, and we will have you back on to talk to you soon. Thanks for coming on today, Joe. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Well, once again, I'd like to thank Joe for coming back on and helping us out with our DCL 101 series and sharing his and his family's 4-day cruise aboard the Dream. Make sure you follow Joe over at milestothemagic.com. He's got a great article right now about saving with Disney gift cards. And also you can catch him as thejoeflies.com and as the Joe Flies on all other social media outlets. Well, I hope you've been enjoying our DCL 101 series. Christy and I think it's a great way to try and help you guys plan your next vacation with all different kind of aspects of cruising with Disney Cruise Line. And if you're enjoying it and would know somebody else who would enjoy it, we sure would appreciate it if you would pass it on to them. Also, if you have time and would like to go over to iTunes and leave us a review, that would be awesome as well. If you'd like to get a hold of me or Christy between now and our next show, you can always do that over at Facebook, myself at DCL Podcast, or on Twitter, DCL Podcast. Of course, you can always find Christy over at packyourpixiedust.com, Pack Your Pixie Dust on Facebook, and Pack YR Pixie Dust on Twitter. Between now and our next show, if you're heading out on your next vacation with your family, all of us here at the DCL Podcast would like to wish you fair winds and safe travels as you head out on your next adventure. Once again, thanks for coming back and taking a listen, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.